to use during those depressing periods when the rain continually streams from the sky. On fine days it is difficult to prevent mildew appearing on the cacao, but at such times it is impossible. However, whenever available, the sun's heat is preferable, for it encourages a slow and even drying, which lasts over a period of about 3 days. Most observers agree with Dr. Sack that the valuable changes which occur during fermentation continue during drying, especially those in which oxygen assists. The full advantage of these is lost if the temperature used is high enough to kill the enzymes, or if the drying is too rapid, both of which may occur with artificial drying. Sun drying is done on cement or brick floors, on coir mats or trays, or on wooden platforms. In order to dry the cacao uniformly, it is raked over and over in the sun. It must be tenderly treated, carefully watched and caressed until the interior becomes quite crisp and in a color a beautiful brown. Sometimes the platforms are built on top of the fermentaries, the cacao being conveyed through a hole in the roof of the fermentary to the drying platform. In Trinidad, the platform always has a sliding roof, which can be pulled over the cacao in the blaze of noon or when a rainstorm comes on. In other places, sliding platforms are used which can be pushed under cover in wet weather. The washing of cacao. In Java, Ceylon, and Madagascar, before the cacao is dried, it is first washed to remove all traces of pulp. This removal of pulp enables the beans to be more rapidly dried, and is considered almost a necessity in Ceylon, where sun drying is difficult. The practice appears at first sight wholly good and sanitary, but although beans so treated have a very clean and bright appearance, looking not unlike almonds, the practice cannot be recommended. There is a loss of from 2 to 10% in weight, which is a disadvantage to the planter, whilst the manufacturer's point of view, washing is objectionable because, according to Dr. Paul Preuss, the aroma suffers. Whilst this may be questioned, there is no doubt that washing renders the shells more brittle and friable, and less able to bear carriage and handling, and when the shell is broken, the cacao is more liable to attack by grubs and mold. Therein lies the chief danger of washing. Claying, coloring, and polishing cacao. Just as in Java and Ceylon, to assist drying, they wash off the pulp. So in Venezuela and often in Trinidad, with the same object, they put earth or clay on the beans. In Venezuela it is a heavy, rough coat, and in Trinidad a film so thin that it is usually not visible. In Venezuela, where fermentation is often only allowed to proceed for 1 day, the use of fine red earth may possibly be of value. It certainly gives the beans a very pretty appearance. They look as though they have been moistened and rolled in cocoa powder. But in Trinidad, where the fermentation is a lengthy one, the use of clay, though hallowed by custom, is quite unnecessary. In the report of the Commission of Inquiry, we read concerning claying that, "It is said to prevent the bean from becoming mouldy in wet weather, to improve its marketable value by giving it a bright and uniform appearance, and to help preserve its aroma." In the appendix to this report the following recommendation occurs: The claying of cacao ought to be avoided as much as possible, and when necessary only sufficient to give a uniform colour ought to be used. In my opinion, manufacturers would do well to discourage entirely the claying of cacao either in Trinidad or Venezuela, for from their point of view it has nothing to recommend it. 1% of clay is sufficient to give a uniform colour, but occasionally considerably more than this is used. If we are to believe reports, deliberate adulteration is sometimes practised. Thus, in How José Formed His Cocoa Estate, we read: a cocoa dealer of our day, to give a uniform color to the miscellaneous brands he has purchased from Pedro, Dick, or Sammy, will wash the beans in a heap, with a mixture of starch, sour oranges, gum arabic, and red ochre. This mixture is always boiled. I can recommend the chinos in this dodge, who are all adepts in all sorts of adulteration schemes. They even add some grease to this mixture, so as to give the beans that brilliant gloss which you see sometimes. In Trinidad the usual way of obtaining a gloss is by the curious operation known as dancing, which is performed on the moistened beans after the clay has been sprinkled on them. It is a quaint sight to see a circle of 7 or 8 colored folk slowly treading a heap of beans. The dancing may proceed for any period up to an hour, and as they tread they sing some weird native chant. Somewhat impressed, I remarked to the planter that it had all the appearance of an incantation. He replied that the process cost 2d per hundredweight. Dancing makes the beans look smooth, shiny, and even, and it separates any beans that may be stuck together in clusters. It may make the beans rounder, and it is said to improve their keeping properties, but this remains to be proved. On the whole, if it is considered desirable to produce a glossy appearance, it is better to use a polishing machine. The weight of the cured cacao bean. Planters and some others may be interested to know the comparative sizes of the beans from the various producing areas of the world. Some ideas of these can be gained by considering the relative weights of the beans as purchased in England. Kind, Grenada. Average weight of one bean, 1.0 grams. Number of beans to the pound, 450. Para, 1.0 grams, 450 beans to the pound. Bahia, 1.1 grams, 410 beans to the pound. Accra, 1.2 grams, 380 beans to the pound. Trinidad, 1.2 grams, 380 beans to the pound. Cameroons, 1.2 grams, 380 beans to the pound. Ceylon, 1.2 grams, 380 beans to the pound. Caracas, 1.3 grams, 350 beans to the pound. Machala, 1.4 grams, 330 beans to the pound. Arriba, 1.5 grams, 300 beans to the pound. Carupano, 1.6 grams, 280 beans to the pound. The yield of the cacao tree. The average yield of cacao has in the past generally been overstated. Whether this is because the planter is an optimist, or because he wishes others to think his efforts are crowned with exceptional success, or because he takes a simple pride in his district, it is hard to tell. Probably the tendency has been to take the finer estates and put their results down as the average. Of the thousands of flowers that bloom on one tree during the year, on an average only about 20 develop into mature pods, and each pod yields about 1 1/3 ounces of dry, cured cacao. Taking the healthy trees with the neglected, the average yield is from 1 1/2 to 2 pounds of commercial cacao per tree. This seems very small, and those who hear it for the first time often make a rapid mental calculation of the amazing number of trees that must be needed to produce the world's supply, at least 250 million trees. Or again, taking the average yield per acre as 400 pounds, we find that there must be well over 1,000,000 acres under cacao cultivation. At the government station at Aburi, Gold Coast, 3 plots of cacao gave in 1914 an average yield of over 8 pounds of cacao per tree, and in 1918 some 468 trees, amelanado, gave as an average 7.8 pounds per tree. This suggests what might be done by thorough cultivation. It suggests a great opportunity for the planters, that, without planting one more tree, they might quadruple